Hi, Sharon. Thanks so much for joining me today on Silver Sage Magazine.
Thank you.
Yeah, so today I have with me Sharon, do you say Boulris?
Boulris.
Boulris, Sharon Boulris, who I was lucky enough to meet on the ski slopes in Vermont. What ski
We
slope?
were at Mount Snow.
Mount Snow in Vermont. Silver Sage was taking up a long weekend to check out the snow up in Vermont with one of our writers. I was actually up there with one of our Silver Sage magazine writers. And I happened to run into you, and I was really fascinated by your story. So I invited you to come on in the studio with me here on Silver Sage Magazine and have a chat, because I think it's really interesting, your life story. So I want to talk to you. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So Sharon, what intrigued me when I met you is we were talking about disabled skiers, and you happened to mention that you were one of the first instructors to work with disabled skiers on snowboarding.
That's correct.
And I know your resume is long and deep. Just to give you an idea, I ski and snowboard as well. I started off as a skier when I was about 2.5, 3 years old. And then I had kids, and my kids got into snowboarding, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe, or so. And so then I started snowboarding. Of course, then the kids flip, right? Then they get back into skiing. You can never keep up. They got back into skiing. So we went back to skiing, and now my adult children are back to snowboarding again. So it's a very complicated mess. But anyway, tell me about your skiing life, and you're still skiing. You're a very avid skier. Tell me about your history.
Well, I started skiing when I was 19, so I was late getting into the sport. And I became a very accomplished skier because I skied with great skiers. And in 1995, I wanted to do something, searching for something in my life to fulfill it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, I'm an accomplished skier, so why don't I teach snow skiing? But I just didn't want to teach to anybody. I thought, I want to teach to disabilities. And I had no clue what I was getting into, because I just thought, oh, you just go teach. Not true. There was a whole educational process to go through, not just learning different disabilities, but medications, behavior. It was like going back to school. And so I took many clinics, and I became a professional ski instructor in 1996 and volunteered at several different mountains. But in 1999, I think it was, or 98, I looked at what was going on in the industry, and snowboarding was skyrocketing. And I thought to myself, don't disabilities want to learn how to snowboard also? So in order to do that, I had to learn to snowboard myself, and I was 48 years old at the time. I thought, oh, let's give it a try. Well, it was a very humbling experience, because at 48, things don't work the same as they did at 28. And being an accomplished skier, going backward into snowboarding was humbling and frustrating. But I persevered.
But that's also part of the fun of it, right? Is that you still learn and you still challenge yourself, because when you've been skiing for 20 plus years, you kind of know what you're doing.
You kind of do. And I had a specific goal in mind, which kept me on focus to perfect my snowboarding skills. So at the time, I was volunteering for an organization called NESA, the New England Healing Sports Association, in their adaptive ski program. So I approached the board of directors and presented the adaptive snowboarding end to their program. They said, no, we can't even think about doing that. a couple weeks later, I'm back teaching there, and the board approached me and said, we've been thinking about it. If you want to do it, you have to do it. Okay. So, okay. So
meaning you have to learn how to snowboard, and then you have to teach adaptive snowboarding.
And I have to learn adaptive methods for
there
teaching.
Any adaptive methods in snowboarding at the time?
Yes. Out West was making great strides in adaptive snowboarding and designing equipment. Now, there's a lot of crossover too, because some of the equipment that's used in adaptive skiing is also used in adaptive snowboarding. So I was able to pick up on those quickly.
So let me interrupt for a minute. I'm trying to picture this in my mind. So being a skier for 30 plus years, I've seen adaptive skiers many times over, right? So often it's someone who's has one leg
Mm-hmm.
or no legs, and they're skiing with I don't know what they're called, but that skis that fit onto them, and they ski in that manner. How does it work with snowboarding? I can't even picture what you're.
It's very similar. It's just a different apparatus on their feet. Also, if it's a paraplegic or quadriplegic, they're skiing in a sit-down ski. They're sitting on top of the skis in a monoski or a biski, depending on the level of disability for that group of population. Now, you can do the same thing with snowboarding. And also, one of the many snowboarders with disabilities have enough strength to stand on a snowboard, and you can tether them.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tether skiers down also, disabled skiers. I worked with an amputee who made great strides on his own in snowboarding. And he taught me how to position the feet on the snowboard with an amputee. Okay. So these are just learning things. There's equipment too. There's a sort of a hula hoop type of thing that the disabled snowboarder can hang on to while the instructor moves them around the slope. There's hand-to-hand, and we call it dancing. So you are literally hand-to-hand with the snowboarder, bringing them into their turns and out of their turns until they can become independent, if possible.
And I'm assuming the difference in teaching an amputee versus teaching someone who's got a paralyzation.
Oh, yes, there is quite a difference because the equipment is quite different. A sit-down snowboard equipment, most paralyzed ski because the equipment is so readily available and so advanced today. Developmental disabilities are also snowboarding. Mm-hmm. Visually impaired are snowboarding. Hearing impaired are snowboarding. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes it's an easier population because they are ambulatory. Developmental disabilities have their other challenges, which you learn tricks of the trade in teaching them. But they're no different than skiers. They're on a board and they want to go down and have fun.
Exactly. It's got to be very rewarding when you're teaching someone, whether they have a disability or not, regardless. Got to be a very rewarding career to take someone who has no concept of how to ski or snowboard and see them go down for the first time.
It's probably more rewarding for me than the athlete. I've gained so much from all the different athletes that I've worked with. Sometimes it's just a smile on their face that is rewarding to me. And one of the things I learned working with the adaptive population is their expectations are not as high as what we call normies. every stride an adaptive person makes is major.
Right.
And so they're not they're not the ones that want to go to the top of the mountain first day out and ski or snowboard down.
Right.
They're actually smarter than that. They know that they need to work their way through it or have help. And some people will always need help
Right.
to do it. But in the end result is that they're having fun.
Sure.
And that to me is the most rewarding thing. And that I've been able to help people have fun.
Absolutely. I have a very good friend, Karan, who years ago had never been skiing before in his life. He went with a bunch of friends. He said to me they're going to go skiing and they'd never been before in their life. It was a group of guys. So I suggested that they go locally to the Poconos. And he said, no, we're going to go to Vermont. And I said, that's probably not a great idea if you've been before. And he said, no, we're going to go to Vermont. So they went to Vermont, drove all that way. So it's a long drive. They rented everything, their equipment, their clothing, down to their pants and hats and everything. They had nothing. They rented it all, which is awesome that you can do that. And he said that they didn't take a lesson. They just went up. And he said they ended up falling so many times that they walked the rest of the way down the hill and drove straight home. So he's my crazy friend, Karan. But I can imagine the population that you specialize with. They're not expecting, like Karan, to just go and ski down the mountain, like you say. They're hoping to just have a great time and make those opportunities of successes, those incremental successes.
It's also opened up families to be able to take their adaptive child and go on ski trips or snowboard trips. It becomes a family experience also.
Right. Tell me about the first student that you had. Tell me about the first student that you had when you taught that student how to snowboard with an adaptive student.
Oh, the first one is hard for me to remember because there's been so many and so many different ages. One snowboarder comes to mind, and I think at the time he was 9 or 10 years old and had suffered an accident when he was younger, so he was paralyzed. I think in his legs, it's somewhere in his legs, but he used braces to walk, so he could look pretty normal, but he wanted to snowboard.
Mm-hmm.
So we outfitted him with a snowboard and the proper stance for his body to work, and he just thrived on snowboarding. And at the time, the USASA Nationals was being held in Waterville Valley, and I think it was in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a chance to enter him into this Nationals, and we asked him, and his name was Brandon, and he was apprehensive but decided to go. When we got there, he was very nervous because all of a sudden the realization of being with all these other athletes, and he was only 9, 10 years old.
Right.
So, and I had a partner working with me at the time who has skyrocketed in the snowboarding industry. So we snowboarded with Brandon and tried to settle him down. And when it came time for competition, this little kid took off. He just took off, and he was doing jumps. He was going up these, we're looking at him, and I was crying because I couldn't believe how brave he was. And he medaled. And so we were very proud of him. That's an unusual story though, because many of the disabilities have been more severe. Mm-hmm. I've worked with the veterans from the Boston VA, and you are dealing now with a different population. And I remember one guy who, adults, because these are adults, mm-hmm. He was visually impaired because he had been injured in combat. And traumatic brain injury was very common for us to deal with. And this was another guy who just had so, he just wanted to do it. And we would ride with him, and we would take him into the half pipe, and we would take him to the rails and everything, and just help him master those and have fun with that.
And you could do the rails?
I did, but not anymore.
But you could do the rails? That's very
yeah, but it was not my forte. And the half pipe, I always got just to jumping out, and it would be like, no. And I would come back down and continue trying and trying. But yeah, I probably was more of a project than some of the disabilities I've worked with.
Now, you still volunteer with the veterans.
Excuse me?
You still volunteer with the veterans.
I did last year. I was asked to come down to Mount Sunapee to help out. And I did with a female veteran. And that was very interesting. She was probably mid-40s. And her husband and son snowboarded, and they wanted her to be more active as part of the family. And she was frightened, basically frightened. And by the end of the day,
she had been a skier before, or a snowboarder before. And
I don't think she had. I'm not sure if she had skied before.
Okay.
But by the end of the day, we had her more comfortable. And she said that she felt she could get better at this because she wanted to be with her family.
Right. That's nice. And
yeah.
Now that's got to say something about your professional career, that here you are, that was in Sunapee, you're saying? So here you are living in Vermont, and Sunapee is calling you up saying, hey, can you come out to New Hampshire and help us with this vet? That speaks to your professional career.
Well, thank you. I spent a lot of time at Mount Sunapee, so they know me, and if I have a chance to help out, I help out.
Right. Is there any advice that you would give our community of Silver Sagers in relation to your career helping others and your volunteerism as a ski and snowboard instructor? Any advice you would give our community?
Well, I think for the older population, volunteering can become a very satisfying thing to do, to give back to your community in whatever way. It doesn't have to be skiing or snowboarding. It can be working in the hospital, nursing home. There's so many things that you can get out and do to help other people, which will satisfy you also.
Absolutely. Well, Sharon, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time in talking to me here at Silver Sage. Our community of Silver Sagers really appreciate it. We look forward to chatting with you again sometime. In the meantime, thank you for being here, and we will see you soon.
Thank you for having me.